One narrow stretch of water. It literally controls a massive portion of the world's energy, yet it's constantly teetering on the edge of crisis. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into an incredibly timely proposal by Sayed Hossein Mousavian. He's a former Iranian diplomat and current researcher who's mapped out a highly detailed legal roadmap for stabilizing one of the absolute most critical waterways on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to look at how international law, economics, and deep historical grievances all collide right here, and, more importantly, how we might actually go about untangling the whole shebang.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. The global choke point crisis. 2. Iran's asymmetrical burden. 3. The transit toll debate. 4. A 4-point legal solution. And finally, 5. Diplomacy over coercion. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Section 1, the global choke point crisis, beyond the nuclear dispute.
It really all comes down to a massive clash of geography and global economics. I mean, think about it. The benefits of the energy flowing through this strait reach your local gas station, right? It impacts the prices of everyday goods all over the globe. But the coastal states? Well, they're the ones expected to bear the primary burden of maintaining the security and infrastructure for all of it. This core question challenges us to look at the massive friction created when a regional waterway literally powers the rest of the world.
You see, the strait is no longer just some regional maritime choke point. It's become the central geopolitical fault line of the entire global economy. With intense military exchanges, U.S. naval operations running under the banner of Project Freedom, and, increasing attacks on commercial shipping, the stakes have just fundamentally shifted. And the ripple effects? They're immediate, and they're severe. Commercial traffic gets disrupted, oil prices surge worldwide, and global shipping insurers are actively warning of systemic economic risks that extend way, way beyond the Middle East. It's a global economic vulnerability that actually affects all of us.
Moving on to Section 2, Iran's asymmetrical burden, a historical perspective.
Now, to really understand the proposed legal solutions here, we have to look impartially at the cumulative damages Iran frames under the United Nations Charter's doctrine of self-defense. For Tehran, their perspective is shaped by decades of major events. We're talking about the massive destruction from Saddam Hussein's invasion back in the 1980s, the severe economic fallout following the unilateral U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA nuclear agreement in 2018, and of course, the recent military strikes by Israel and the United States in 2025 and 2026. The core argument being made here is that no other state governing a strategic strait has faced this level of sustained confrontation while simultaneously being expected to guarantee regional maritime security.
And all that historical friction leads us to a truly enormous estimate of damages. According to Iranian government spokeswoman Fatemeh Mohajerani, early estimates indicate that Iran has suffered something like $270 billion in damages since the start of the recent conflict on February 28, 2026 alone. To put that massive number into perspective, that financial toll is literally larger than the entire gross domestic product of many nations. So when we talk about the concept of an asymmetrical burden, this immense financial and structural toll is exactly what's being referenced.
Okay, that brings us to Section 3, the transit toll debate, two competing views.
With those costs soaring, the idea of imposing transit tolls has naturally become a massive geopolitical flashpoint. On one side, you have the United States and European governments. They argue strictly for freedom of navigation, and they view any toll as a dangerous, outright illegal precedent for international waters worldwide. But conversely, the Iranian perspective emphasizes that massive, uncompensated burden of providing security, pilotage, and environmental protection in what is a highly militarized zone. So what we have is a fundamental clash between the rights of global transit and the very real costs of local maintenance.
The United States takes a very hard-line legal stance on this. As U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated, they view these tolls not just as illegal under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, but, quote, unacceptable and dangerous for the world. From the U.S. point of view, protecting the transit passage regime is absolutely a non-negotiable pillar of international maritime law.
Let's transition to Section 4, a 4-point legal solution, cooperative burden sharing.
So acknowledging that unilateral tolls aren't considered legally sound under international law, the author proposes a legal off-ramp. It's a 4-part framework, and it's designed to transform this idea of an illegal toll into a system of cooperative global burden sharing. Step 1 is pretty straightforward: recover costs for actual services rendered, things like environmental protection and emergency rescue. But it's really steps 2, 3, and 4 that push the boundaries of international legal innovation. Let's break those down.
Now here is where it gets legally fascinating. The proposal suggests dusting off Article 43 of UN clause. This is a provision that actually already exists explicitly to encourage burden-sharing agreements, but honestly, it's rarely utilized. The big idea here is to leverage this obscurity to establish a UN-supervised Hormuz Maritime Security and Environmental Protection Fund. Under this model, energy importing nations, massive shipping companies, and Persian Gulf energy exporters would all pitch in financially to maintain safe navigation. It's a real game changer because it completely reframes the contentious conversation from illegal tolls into lawful cooperation.
Then, the third step brings in a really surprising twist, integrating environmental law directly into military security. The recent confrontations have massively increased the risks of oil spills and marine ecosystem destruction in the Strait. By invoking the polluter pays principle, the argument is made that nations whose military actions cause these environmental risks should be legally and financially obligated to contribute to the Strait's stabilization and its ecological remediation.
Finally, the fourth step addresses what the author sees as a glaring historical double standard. Consider this. After Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the UN successfully created a massive compensation commission to process claims. But after Iraq invaded Iran a decade earlier, well, nothing comparable was ever established. The proposal argues that this specific lack of historical compensation is actually the root of a lot of deep regional mistrust. And for any future framework for Hormuz to be truly legitimate, it must account for these decades of unresolved damages.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Diplomacy over Coercion, the Path Forward. Ultimately, the conclusion drawn here is stark. Military coercion simply won't secure the Strait long-term. A durable reality requires real diplomatic innovation. We're talking about active de-escalation between Iran, the United States, and the wider international community. It requires balancing the world's absolute need for freedom of navigation with a fair, equitable system of burden sharing for the coastal states. Without this kind of balanced, multilateral framework, the Strait is just going to remain a permanent epicenter of global economic anxiety. I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought from the author. As you've seen today, global trade, regional security, and international law are all deeply, deeply entwined here. So the ultimate question is, are our existing legal frameworks flexible enough to evolve, to recognize these asymmetrical burdens, and to turn a historic flashpoint into a model for cooperative security? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep thinking critically, keep analyzing the structures behind the headlines, and I'll catch you next time.